Hi everyone, welcome to Hacking the Workforce, the podcast that gives talent leaders a platform to discuss their companies, the recruitment process, and why you should be thinking of a career with them. Today, absolutely delighted to welcome Emma Gallagher, the Senior Manager of Global Talent Acquisition at BeyondTrust, the global leader in privileged access management and identity security solutions. Emma, absolute pleasure as always to have you on here. How's everything going so far in your day? Okay?
All good. It's Friday, so I can't complain. Nearing the end of a very busy week.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Well, look, absolute pleasure to have you on this. Obviously, I know there's a lot of people out there really keen to understand what's been happening at BeyondTrust. Obviously, the great work that you and your team have been doing over the last sort of 12 months. I know we've discussed it at depth. And yeah, just to understand a bit more about the company and why they should consider a career with you. So I suppose the first question I wanted to get into really was around the company culture. It's a really big sort of sticking point really for people at the minute when they're looking for a new job. I wanted to really understand the company culture, whether it's the right fit for them. Yeah, tell me a bit about the culture at BeyondTrust, beyond sort of the website mission statement that people can read.
The real BeyondTrust.
The real BeyondTrust.
What I know of BeyondTrust now that I'm nearing my 8-year mark here. So culture is huge. Culture is very important to me. Personally, I feel like candidates and people, they want to work for companies where there's a good alignment, like with their own like personal values and the company values. So probably part of the reason that I'm still here and enjoying the work that I do and the people that I work with at BeyondTrust is the culture. And the way I would describe the culture here would be, it's very open, it's very transparent. Like, there's no like hierarchy, like everybody is very approachable. It's a real like team orientated, supportive environment. Like, you know, put your hand up, whether that's just to learn something new, get involved in something new so you can invest in your own personal development. Or if you're stuck on something, there's an issue, like there's always somebody to reach out to, and it's a safe environment for you to do that, for you to put your hand up. I think that's important. I think that very much ties to like a culture of continuous learning, where L&D is honestly at the center of everything we do. We've got a fantastic learning and development team. Cool. We have like various self-led like learning capabilities in the company, and we have a lot of kind of specific like modules and training opportunities where people can get involved and continue to grow and thrive. So that's a big piece. Another piece would be like inclusivity. You know, we really are, it's a place for anyone. We really want people to feel like they belong here, and that they can be their true, authentic self. So our whole EVP is built around believe, belong, become. I think the belief for me ties to the whole sense of purpose. Yeah, we're really, as a cybersecurity company, we're making a real world difference. And anyone who works here, the work that they do is a direct impact of that. So there's like a true meaning. And I think, having that culture where you feel like you're contributing and you're actually making like a positive impact, like to the world without sounding dramatic. It's genuine. It's like constantly on the news. Cyber breach here, cyber breach. There's been a few in the UK with big retailers, haven't there, just lately? Recently. So I think there's the believe. The belong is all around like, the team, like being able to bring your authentic self to work. Believe, belong, become, and the become all ties to what I just touched on earlier around L&D. Like we really want people to be able to, give feedback, receive feedback, like understand like where their gaps are and really can see that career path and progression opportunity and how they can enable themselves, but equally how we'll support them internally as a company. So hopefully that gives a view of the culture.
Brilliant. And it's great. You've touched on a few points there regarding sort of learning and development, which is obviously something we'll cover in a bit. Also sort of regarding the inclusivity part, which is obviously huge for a lot of organizations at the minute, really trying to drive that and make sure everyone's feeling part of the team and, trying to make sure, especially in this remote world that we live in, everybody feels, part of the business and not just an island on their own.
Engaged and connected and not isolated.
Exactly. So with that in mind, what makes a standout candidate for BeyondTrust? What is it whether it's technical, obviously the technical competence around, privileged access management, identity, but also the soft skills as well. What makes a top performer, what makes somebody fit within BeyondTrust and be successful?
Obviously, the skills and the competencies are going to be specific dependent on level of role and nature of role. But I think for me, something that is not just for me, the company, and honestly our philosophy when we are recruiting, we want to uncover the potential that somebody has. Like, we're not constantly looking for the finished article, because we want people who have that mindset where they want to continually grow and learn, and that they they have that level of humility where they're not the finished article themselves, because they have gaps and they want to develop. So for us, like, aptitude for learning is something that's huge. If we're in an interview process and we're asking questions relating to that, like, if a candidate can, show us examples of where they've learned something new, or where they've maybe pushed themselves out of their comfort zone to take on a new challenge, whether that's personal or professional, honestly, I feel like it just gives us a real window into who they are, like, as a person. So I definitely say it's like that aptitude for learning. In terms of like somebody's like personality and how they would like complement, like, we want people who really care and invested in the work that they do. So I think trying to uncover like how much somebody actually enjoys the work that they do, because if you don't enjoy recruitment, like, I just don't think you could be successful at doing that, because it takes a certain type of mindset, and you require, optimism and some resilience and a lot of persistence to uncover and find, the right candidate. But if you're passionate and you're invested in that element of your work, like, then when you reach the end result and you're successful, the reward is there. So it's definitely somebody who has like a clear passion. We always look as well for candidates who, show a level of commitment, a loyal, there's good longevity, like in previous roles where they've, invested and really grown and learned. Of course, in today's market, there are scenarios, unfortunately, where people have been impacted, and that might show. So we never rule people out, like, purely on the basis of like job tenure. But I would say that's important, because I think it can show like that you were with a company, that you applied yourself, that you maximize the opportunity that you had at that company, and then the motivation to make a move to potentially join BeyondTrust. Like, we want to understand that, and we want to, we want that to kind of make sense to us. So X company, I have learned all of these things, I've progressed, there's no next level, like, I want the next big thing. I think that BeyondTrust is a place for me to do that. I can bring X, Y, and Z. Really, if I was to summarize that, it's someone who's got a passion for the work that they do, who is keen and eager to continue learning, and he's really, somebody who has genuine motivations, wants longevity, really, wants to contribute to the company's success, and is excited about the work that we're doing.
Fantastic. And again, I suppose we're getting that from a lot of clients at the minute regarding that sort of longevity, and like you said, there's a lot of things that have happened over the last 5 years since the pandemic. A lot of companies have hired and then obviously made layoffs. And ultimately that has resulted in people probably having a few more jobs on their resumes than what they would hope. And I suppose that goes for sort of a GTM perspective, people in sales and technical sales, marketing, etc. But we've also seen it from a technical standpoint, where companies are growing so fast, or they're scaling, new cyber companies that are out there, and technical people are constantly looking for the next challenge. What's the next motivation for them? So sometimes technical people will jump in and out of roles just because there's something potentially happening there. And that's I suppose that's one of the things that we're seeing at the minute, Emma, as well. I mean, just regarding sort of, I know you mentioned sort of some of the skills that you look for within. So from a technical standpoint, if you're hiring, and obviously you and your team are looking through a resume for, a specific engineer role, are you considering people from outside the industry that you can train and support and guide and nurture? Or are your hiring managers looking for, the ready-made article, someone that can come in and land? Just because at the minute, obviously, a lot of people are looking for, roles that might have that ability to cross-train. So, where's your stance on the technical side? And then obviously to flip that on the sales and GTM side, do you only look for people from the identity space or cyberspace or SaaS? What's sort of your focus on both areas?
I mean, I would start on the sales side, and I would say to you, and it depends like on the level of role that we're recruiting. Obviously, if we're looking a senior account manager, enterprise account manager level of sales role, it really helps like for them to ramp and make a really quick impact if they have some relevant domain knowledge. So if they've got cybersecurity, and we'll usually flex, our recruiting managers, our leaders, they're very open-minded. I think that's embedded in that culture of like hire for potential, like where you can. So there's flex around that. It's rare that we would say it's a prerequisite that you have like very, focused knowledge around identity security, but we'll flex because if you've sold a cyber product or even not cyber, but quite a technical product, then, and you've got the aptitude to learn and you're a smart person, then with our internal enablement, with the support of your leader, your team, and your own personal investment, like we know that ramp of learning our product portfolio is going to be achieved, because they're more focused on like, are they going to succeed? Do they have the right competencies and mindset to be a successful salesperson? And all of those kind of qualities. So that's more important. On the technical side, like with regards to like technical, like specific coding language experience, again, depends, if we're hiring for a senior level role and it's essential, like for a project success, then we will need to uncover like maybe deep technical competencies. However, on the technical side and the sales side, we recruit from any level, like entry level, like graduate software engineers. In fact, right now at the moment, we're looking for like a very green, like fresh graduate or college leaver who we can do a 6-month training course to prime them for the first step into a sales role. And the graduate engineer, we just honestly look for people who are passionate about tech. They want to secure, an opportunity where they can learn and grow. And it is a very kind of supportive and learning culture. So no, some roles, obviously there's a requirement. If it's a senior level role, particularly if it's a leadership role, we might be requiring that leadership. So there's definite flex. I think any company who is restricting themselves that you need someone who is the finished article, you just removing like a huge chunk of talent in the market. Like, there's plenty of things that we don't know, but if we've got the aptitude to learn it and the drive, then, that is the recipe for success to me. Like the required baseline of experience, but then, the attitude and the qualities that are, going to apply and make you successful in the role. So definitely, I think open-minded with that regard.
Fantastic. Yeah, just touching on obviously on the sales side. Yeah, if someone's sold complex software solutions, and with the training that you give them, they're going to be able to pick that up, especially if they've done cybersecurity as well. They're speaking to the right the right stakeholders and buying managers, the CISOs, etc. So they've got the relationships. It's just a different tech. I suppose some people often question when I say, do you want people from a competitor? They're like, well, no, Damien, because if they're working for our competitor, one week they're selling their product, telling customers it's the best thing. The next week they're telling customers to buy from us.
It's always the best thing.
So yeah.
And we, in sales, like some of the best, like most successful people that we've hired, like they didn't have the cyber, but it was actually part of their motivation for considering like an opportunity at BeyondTrust, because they wanted to learn like a new technology, and it was an industry niche that like really piqued their interest, and they were able to kind of showcase that this is why they're interested, here's some research that they've done, like etc. So I think sometimes that can really excite someone and like drive them to be successful. So yeah, it's not a prerequisite in my opinion. Sometimes at the very senior level, we will look for that initially, but if we feel like we're not finding like a good fit from that values piece, like and somebody who we feel is dynamic and adaptable and a team player, because if they don't have those qualities, they could have all of the identity security knowledge in the world, they won't be suitable in our culture or environment. So you've got it's a fine balancing act, and you've got to flex.
Totally get it. And yeah, you're completely right. And as long as there is that sort of, that flexibility there, then at least people, that are interested in BeyondTrust and a career there can understand that. And then I suppose that leads us quite nicely on into the next one, which was around sort of bridging the cyber talent gap, or this gap that's supposed to be in cyber at the minute, whether you believe it or not. There's supposed to be millions and millions of vacancies out there. But obviously, knowing you and obviously all about BeyondTrust, I know you've got sort of some special training and university that goes on. So, tell us all about what you're doing, other than obviously bringing in, college graduates into sales and technical roles to train them in the BeyondTrust way. But tell us about the development and what else you're giving to the community to get people into cyber.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's quite close to my heart, because I feel like we need to, as companies, I think everyone's got a responsibility to educate. Honestly, I feel from high school level, because there are, young girls, boys as well, who maybe feel like they're not technical, so they're not going to pursue a career in cybersecurity. I would not describe myself to be a technical person. I recruited in engineering for many years. I still do quite a bit of technical recruiting. Sometimes I need to obviously understand the technical complexities of a solution sale or a role that I'm recruiting for. But fundamentally, the role of a recruiter is not a technical role. And there are many roles within cyber companies. HR, finance, general administrative, legal type roles, sales, because technical ability in sales for me is a nice to have. That is a nice to have. But ultimately, if you are a strong account executive and you can understand the base level of technical requirement of the solution, you can have those conversations. It's more about building the rapport, having the connection, building the relationships. You will have a technical person, an SE, who will be there to support you when it becomes more complex. So for me, going back to the high school piece, one thing that BeyondTrust does do is we do sponsor some of our women who work for us. Cool. To do mentorships at local schools in Manchester. And the aim of that program is not to educate on getting into cybersecurity, but it's all about, getting these young girls to understand whatever they want to pursue, the self-belief, just, apply yourself, work hard, and you can, progress. And I think it's an education piece at that level. So that's important. I think internally, what we do, particularly if we recruit someone on a more junior level, is that we do have a global enablement team. We have a global enablement team, which is specific to sales training. So ensuring that, they're equipped with the knowledge, the tools, the systems to do their job effectively. And that's obviously initial onboarding, but it's everboarding, because it's an ever-changing competitor landscape, and they need to understand how they differentiate the BeyondTrust solution and all of these components to make them successful. So that is there. And then from not specific to sales, we have BeyondTrust University, and this is an internal initiative where we ensure that regardless of your role, your level, if there is something that you need to learn to support you, to set you up for success in your role, then there are modules, there are training courses, we will support you. And we do things like interview training internally as well. So it's actually a leadership course. So all the components, if somebody's progressing into a manager role and they're taking on their first, direct report, do they understand how to performance manage, how to, set goals and hold team members accountable to achieving goals and aligning what their team is trying to deliver to the overarching business strategy. So it's complex, and there's a lot of kind of pieces to fit together there. But I think, we're doing a great job of ensuring that we set team members up for success.
Fantastic. Excellent. And that sort of internal training is amazing. And again, I suppose it goes back to our previous point around sort of, the flexibility around bringing people from, other sides of technology or other sides of technology sales that have those sort of complementary skills that you can then hone and train and guide and support and nurture and obviously give them the skills that they need from a sort of a privileged access and identity space, really. So, that's absolutely amazing. Obviously, you touched on inclusivity. I know sort of DE&I is quite big for a lot of companies at the minute, and I know obviously we mentioned it around the culture piece. Obviously, I know that with you having a female CEO, which is absolutely amazing, a lot of your sort of female leaders are very sort of vocal, and their branding's amazing on LinkedIn around sort of women in cyber. I know obviously a certain individual is attending that and speaking there next week, which is amazing. Just regarding sort of inclusivity and not necessarily male and female, how does BeyondTrust to make sure that the recruitment process is inclusive of everybody, and making sure that, there's no sort of, conscious bias when it comes to interview processes, and then obviously when onboarding, how that sort of continues throughout the business.
Yeah. I think it, fundamentally it does start like with that external facing job advert. We always want to ensure that job advertisements have inclusive language, and we will run them through, gender decoders, just to ensure there's no bias around like some of the requirements. When we're doing the initial intake calls with the hiring managers, often, there'll be an endless list of required experience. And I think it's a recruiter's job to really dig down into that, to understand like which genuinely are essential, which can we hire for potential, compromise on, like flex on the baseline level of experience. Because I think fundamentally there are certain candidates out there who may well, read, we're all wired differently. Somebody may read a job description and think, I only have 5 out of the 8 required skills, so I'm going to be unsuccessful if I apply for that job, so I won't click the apply button, move on. That's what we want to avoid, right? So we want to ensure that like the advert is reflective, obviously, of what we're seeking, but that it doesn't like negatively deter people who could well have the potential to learn if they've got some gaps. So, inclusive language is definitely important. When we begin to like move through the actual interview process, something that we've implemented here and started actually to measure the talent acquisition team on is percentage of it's percentage of diverse interview panels. So when we say diverse, like if we progress a candidate through our process, usually in our processes, there is an interview step where there are multiple people on that panel. Let's say maybe it's a presentation panel, maybe it's a mock demonstration, maybe it's just a meet the team. But we want to ensure that whoever is on that interview panel is representative of BeyondTrust. So, it will be people from different ethnic backgrounds, people from different walks of life, older people, younger people, female, male, people with different sexual preferences. Like we want to ensure like there's representation, because internally that's who we are. There's just a ton of like different personalities, and that's what makes companies successful. Like with more diversity, like there's more kind of creativity of thought, and I think problems. So I know there's like reports and statistics and data that shows like the more diverse the team is, like the more efficient they are at complex and creative problem solving. So there's a business justification, but fundamentally I think it just happens quite innately here, and it's just the right thing for companies to do. So the diverse interview panels is good, because from the candidate perspective as well, and I know you might feel quite intimidated if you join a remote interview and there are 5 of the same faces on there and you look very different to them. We want to ensure that there's some diversity to make the candidate feel more comfortable, so that the candidate can showcase themselves on the interview. But not just that, when they walk away from the interview process, if they are successful and they get a job offer, if they've maybe just not felt that through that interview process, like it's a place where they would feel comfortable and belong, and there's maybe like-minded people or people that they could feel a connection to, they might not have the confidence to accept a job opportunity. So, the process is a two-way street. Of course, we're trying to understand, like, have they got the base level of experience? Have we evaluated that? Do they have the right mindset, drive, traits that will make them successful? But they're interviewing us, can I see myself working for this person, working with this person? What is the way of work here? How do the processes work? Will that suit what I prefer in terms of pace of role and how I get my job done? We definitely want to educate and be a real, like, it's supposed to be like a true window into what it would be to be a software engineer at BeyondTrust, for example.
I think you're right, and I think one of the key things is having that diverse panel representation of the business is great moving forward, and it is a two-way street. The interview process is, it's not just the company assessing the candidate and the fit for the company. It's the candidate's also assessing, do I want to continue in the process as well? So yeah, I think that sometimes gets lost when it's either a candidate-driven recruitment market, or as seems to be at the minute, very much a business sort of driven recruitment market, just because of the unfortunate layoffs and redundancies. The market is kind of saturated. Companies are taking a bit longer, to assess people when it comes to interview, and ultimately we'll miss out on different people. But it's still very much a two-way street, which
100%. And yeah, and on the diversity piece, like it is continued like after the onboarding and once someone enters the business, because I've just used one example. We have like what we term BTRGs, which are Beyond Trust resource groups. For me, it's a place for everyone, and honestly, there's so many different resource groups. There's a Hispanic group, there's an Asian group, there's a Black group, Latino. There's genuinely like a resource group for everybody in the company, and if there isn't one, you're honestly encouraged to spin up your own and like engage with people around the business. So LGBTQ as well, there's a resource group. There's honestly something for everyone, and then not specific to like the resource groups, which are honestly there to allow people to connect, because we're a global company, right? But we predominantly have a remote workforce, so it goes back to that connection and engagement and people feeling like they are connected with their employees, so that we can ensure that we've got high levels of employee engagement, satisfaction, that we can retain the talent that we recruited in the first place. So I think there's a lot on offer internally, once somebody joins, from that inclusivity perspective as well.
Fantastic. Excellent. And I suppose leading nicely into the next one around that sort of inclusivity, and also the groups you mentioned, and, making people constantly feel welcomed and warm within the business, and obviously ticking that culture point of view, the culture that you drive. What's the stands for BeyondTrust remote working? Because obviously we've seen a lot of sort of advertisements and news articles over the last sort of 12 months where, companies are looking to bring employees back into the offices, even though obviously throughout the pandemic a lot of remote working was sort of promoted. So where does BeyondTrust stand on remote working? Is it fully remote? Is it partially remote? What's sort of the bulk of our workforce is remote. However, we do have certain roles where we feel it's like fundamental to their success that they work in an office on a hybrid basis, because their team leader, who is literally their coach, can coach them in person day to day. I do think something that is lost from the remote working is, and I'll use as an example, when I first started in a recruitment consultancy, like just being sat in that office surrounded by consultants, like up on the phone, like listening into, offers being extended, like negotiations, candidate qualification, like it's just, you learn so much, like on the job, just being present, listening. And honestly, like just being in the office, just going to get coffee, like those water cooler conversations or whatever, connecting with peers from different departments, like, so definitely at more junior levels. So like sales development representatives, we do like a 3-day hybrid, and we have offices around the world where they will be on a hybrid basis. Once they've progressed, and if they are then promoted to the next level, there comes like more flexibility around that, and they can be remote. So it really depends. Obviously, from a technical perspective, we do have some technical roles. Our service desk team, we tend to have people in office from time to time. However, again, they're fully able to do their jobs remotely. Network engineers need to be within a reasonable distance of various data centers. So sometimes roles like that. But generally, I think we're really set up to succeed like on a remote basis. But, I think there's an appetite for that office culture again, because we have a lot of people, and I'll use our Manchester office as an example, like they are on remote contracts, but they religiously go in a few days a week because they enjoy like the interaction, like especially the sales team, they enjoy being with people and having those conversations. So we don't enforce it for those people who are, officially remote, but it's really nice to see that there's like an appetite for them
to be in person, to meet the teams. And there's good flexibility, but we also have some really nice offices, and I think that's part of the appeal. People want a change of scenery. Like, you do go crazy like sat in your own four walls at home, so we try to we trust our employees, right? We're recruited, there's trust, we always assume positive intent. We've been succeeding and tracking successfully as a company. It works for us. Like, if it works, then there's no need for us to enforce that change back into the office. If people are performing to a high standard and that's evident, then we're flexible.
That's awesome. I mean, obviously, obviously from previous conversations, I worked from home for 6.5 years, and at the end, I just had, this nightmare. The walls were closing in. Obviously, I'm in the office here 4 days a week. I absolutely love being in the office. It's great. And like you said, that company culture gets across to people. And I think, when you are recruiting people and they're fully remote, sometimes they can feel, a bit, I'm left out, I'm an island on my own kind of thing. So it is great to have that opportunity to go to an office. So as long as people have got that, then that drives that culture for me as well. I think that's awesome. And obviously the whole sort of mix of remote working, I suppose when you've got, graduates and SDRs joining, if they've got an area they can go to and listen to experienced people, and learn from those. Again, it only gets better for you really moving forward in their careers. Talking about sort of from a personal level now, and obviously really keen to get your thoughts on this. So, the cyber market is changing so much. We've got AI, we've got lots of, quantum computing, everything sort of potentially affecting cybersecurity. I suppose the question to you is, what do you see being the biggest challenges for cybersecurity over the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you see the development from a sort of a talent point of view, where you see, companies changing? Because I know from speaking to a few clients, it's more around from a technical standpoint, the soft skills rather than just being hands-on. They want people that can be customer interactive. So what's sort of your thoughts? How do you see sort of a shift in the market over the next 3 to 5 years in cyber?
I mean, I do feel like there's been, like you said, since COVID, hate to say the word out loud, but since it's 5 years ago now, but this last 5 years for me, like in recruitment, the years they've flown by for one, but they've been like very different markets. So I think, 2021, 2022, like it was, a highly competitive market, because I think a lot of companies were playing catch up. Now, I think a lot of tech companies really scaled probably too quickly, as you say. And then a big challenge has been obviously rifts, redundancies, scale backs. That to me has, it's saturated the market. And a real challenge has been, whenever we do post a vacancy, like we can be getting hundreds of applicants, close to 1,000, like depending on where we post a job. Now, it's really difficult for us to uphold like the high level of candidate experience that is important to us, because we always want to ensure that every single applicant who's taken the time to apply to an opportunity at BeyondTrust, hears from us. So, it's not AI, but there are things we're trying to do, like to automate our processes to ensure that we're able to review and prioritize like the right applicants, ensure that we give feedback to anyone who has applied. I think one of the challenges is really for recruiters to focus and to be able to target and uncover the right candidates. And because there are so many candidates coming through so many avenues, direct applicants like on LinkedIn, it's really hard to drown that noise out and focus, like to make sure that you're prioritizing on the right candidates. So I think that's definitely going to be a challenge going forward. I think the uncertainty within this market, I personally and my recruiters, we really have seen, particularly this year, like an uptick in the competition. If we get a candidate to offer, it seems that companies are trying harder to then counter offer and retain talent, because for me, it costs a hell of a lot more money and causes more pain if you don't retain your best people, 100%. Like retain them so we don't have to go to market. So, it's been tough to attract the best talent that's going to fit for us. And I think another part of that reason is the uncertainty. So although a candidate might go through a process and be really excited and engaged and want to pursue an opportunity, like the safety blanket of a counter offer to stay I think more people are taking that. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, not by any means, but I just think people they're a little sensitive to, you know, the risk factor in the market. Like, you know, 100%. I think people used to be bolder and be like, I'm ready for a fresh challenge. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to push myself out of my comfort zone. Now there's a lot of like pressure and consideration from candidates around what's the economic climate. Like, I'm taking a risk, like, you know, but I think one of the things that we're able to showcase, like at BeyondTrust, and we're very honest and open with this, you know, you can see our financials, you can see the growth, like we have really scaled, but we've done it sustainably. And when the market got highly volatile, we did slow the recruiting because we really wanted to protect like what we had already. So, you know, I feel we've done a real good job of sustainable scaling as a company. So I think, you know, it's a challenge for companies to do that, but it's something that we're quite focused on, and I think we need to continue to do to make sure we're growing as a company, because we are, and we see new opportunity for us to grow in certain countries and we're investing there. But there's a lot of, you know, research that goes behind those decisions, like they're thought through decisions. It's not a snap judgment to enter a new country, but we can see the data is showing us that there's a real opportunity here. And if, for example, we put, you know, a dedicated sales rep there, we probably should be generating X amount of revenue. So, you know, I think the challenge is like the economic volatility, you know, the political instability, like candidates are just a little, I think, risk averse at the moment is probably like, which is making it harder to attract and encourage and engage people to. But I think, you know, I think if people are smart in their job searching, you know, do the research into the company, like go through your interview process, like, you know, you can get a high level of confidence so that you can make that decision. And I do think the market is improving. You know, I feel like this has been last year, the year before, but it's competitive now in a different way. Like people are trying to hold on to good candidates. And I think they're making it, I think companies are just making it harder for people to make a move, but you know, and like you said, you've got that risk averse, you've got that, you know, people are, you know, last in first out kind of mentality, which doesn't always happen, you know, but you know, people's mindset, that's what people think. But totally agree on all the points sort of mentioned there. It's definitely changing. The market is definitely picking up, and we will see that flip where it goes from being a business-driven recruitment market to a candidate-driven recruitment market. And when that happens, you know, companies will have to target more. They will have to sort of look at different types of people, you know, different types of backgrounds in order to bring them in and train and support and guide. And like you said, people from competitors or from, you know, closer industry targets may not always be wanting to move. You know, it really depends on the level. But that's absolutely amazing. And then sort of one of the things I wanted to touch on was around sort of, and this is quite unique really to identity. I've only seen this, and I've been recruiting for 19 years. I've only sort of seen it last February, was around sort of identity theft, sort of fraudulent resumes. And there seems to be a real uplift over the last sort of 15, 16 months, whether it's the introduction of AI and the advancements around ChatGPT and all that sort of stuff. I've seen it with quite a few clients, more in the identity space. Are you and your team seeing it, and how are you sort of trying to combat that? Because it is quite a bit of an issue when it comes to applications and interviews. It is interesting. I don't have like first-hand experience, but what I would say is that it's a constant like theme of conversation, particularly with global tech recruiters. I'd say more focused US wise, that we are seeing like a real uptick like in these fake CVs, fake resumes, like fake candidates. And it is a little concerning because, you know, personally, I probably need some training to understand, like, well, how do you decipher? Because I think they're getting savvy, and as a team, we're trying to collaborate and share like this insight and intel into what we should be aware of. I mean, obviously, being a cyber company, we have like constant like training to ensure that we, you know, understand like how to be like savvy about any potential reach outs that are, you know, not legitimate. But I'm probably not close enough to it. I have heard this, like in the market, that there are these deep fake CVs and resumes and candidates who are cropping up as a way for them to garner information, like to get with a recruiter and to scour like what information they have. So I certainly think we need to all be a lot more aware and considerate to that in terms of our journey as to what we're doing to counter that. I probably don't have any examples now, but
no, that's fine.
I think it's going to be a hot topic.
Yeah, no, it was on the technical side. It was some technical recruitment that we were doing, and we obviously implemented a process where we were getting people to, show their green cards, their passports, their ID, whilst on the call with us, a video call, because this one particular client was having issues where they were offering candidates, and then on the day of that candidate starting, it was a completely different person. So there's actually companies, groups of people out there proactively interviewing for roles, getting the roles, and then giving them to somebody else to do it, which is, and by the time obviously a company is aware of what's happening, it's a month or so in, they've already paid out a salary, which could be, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 or something more. And that the individual gets released. But it's definitely on the rise. I think the US does seem to be getting a hold of it. I think these groups of people are moving now into other areas, other countries where it's perhaps not as widely known. So just something to get out there. And then I suppose sort of the last thing really is, we've covered culture, we've covered the business and what you look for. Obviously, we've talked about application volumes and obviously the struggle to get through. A lot of people at the minute, it seems to be white noise. They're applying for roles, they're not hearing anything back. What is the easiest way for someone to connect with BeyondTrust, your talent team, if they feel they've got the best experience and they're interested in working for the company? What is the best way for someone to get in touch with you and your team?
I would say, and let's use those jobs like where as an example, we post it and then the weekend has passed and we've had 500 applicants.
Yeah.
For me, like as a recruiter, obviously we go through those, like we have various like capabilities where we can filter through, like to find the ones, that we need to prioritize to look through. If you want to differentiate yourself, I would say one of the things that you could do is if you have a connection or somebody who could vouch for you as a referrer at the company that you're targeting. LinkedIn has a pretty cool tool for that. If you click on a job and you see the job, there's a little section, I'm sure, and it says like who you might know, X company. There might just be a first degree connection. But what I would say, if you want to be bold, like there is no harm in reaching out to somebody at the company you're trying to apply to say, hey, I'm going to apply for this role. I wonder if you would refer me like for the position, because fundamentally when we're receiving referrals, obviously we want our employees to refer sensibly. But if somebody clearly on LinkedIn has a good profile, they're a fit to the role in terms of their experience level, there's an incentive for somebody internally to receive a referral fee. So I think that could help, because obviously for us, referrals are a really high percentage of, I think so far this year, about a quarter of our hires in the sales team have been through referrals. So it's a really important pool for us. And we see a lot of success from a performance and longevity standpoint of the referrals. So if you can get a referral, that would help. It's not the be all and end all. Obviously, make sure that the application you're submitting is the most appropriate application. So yes, we all have a CV, but there's really no harm in ensuring that you tweak that CV to emphasize the key requirements that you possess that role is requiring. And even like in the profile on your CV, like maybe tailor that and tweak that, because that is the first thing that the recruiter is reading. And if you've got some standout 1, 2, 3 max sentences that are like, boom, that's what I'm looking for, that it will engage the recruiter to continue like a deeper review of your experience and potentially progress you to the next stage. So I would say, think about your CV and ensure that it is the most appropriate like alignment as you can to the job description. Unfortunately, if you are applying and you don't meet the baseline level of experience, that volume of applicant, that they're going to be the ones that probably get prioritized and reviews first. So I would try to be targeted about your job search. I would always try and do your research before you hit the apply button. I know you can see a new job, get excited, just click and send your generic CV. Honestly, just take a day or so just to tweak it, tidy it up. If you can see a recruiter at the company, now I will not lie, We do get inundated.
Yeah.
But we care, right? We care. We don't want unread messages in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So we'll always try to action that. And I get a lot of messages through LinkedIn, a lot of emails about, and I'm not in the detail, but I'll always endeavor to like flip to the appropriate recruiter and request that they follow up. So, you know, you could be tapping in and being creative. I do think there's a fine balance though. Like it can be a little bit of a red flag if a candidate contacts like multiple leaders in a particular department. You know, you need to like have a fine line of being smart and maybe creative with your approach, not being too intense, like in terms of blanketing every person that you can think of, because that sometimes can create a bit of a
that's the killer.
Yes, it just creates a bit of a red flag. It's like you don't want to come across as desperate, but I totally appreciate like the market is so tough for a candidate and you can become disheartened, like, but you just need to maintain like that optimism and just take your time rather than blanket apply, to just tweak and put yourself in the best position before you hit that apply button.
100%. Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Emma, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having all this time with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. Obviously, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Everybody out there watching, obviously reach out to Emma and her team, and BeyondTrust are a great company. Lots of great opportunities for people from graduate and interns right through to the experienced people in the market. So nothing left for me to say, but thank you again, Emma. It's been an absolute pleasure, and enjoy the long weekend, and we'll catch up soon.
I will do. Thanks, Damien. You too.
Thank you.